So today I'm doing something a little bit different. Instead of just looking at one book, I'm going to be looking at an entire trilogy of books. And that's going to be the Summoner Trilogy, which consists of the Novice, the Inquisition, and the Battlemage, which just came out a couple weeks ago. And they're all written by Taran Matharu, or Taran Matharu. Taran Matharu. I don't know, this guy. Like, I have no idea how to say his name, but his books are pretty good, so let's talk about those.
This is the introduction song. It's not very good, but it's not too long.
So a little bit of background first. The first book in the trilogy, The Novice, was actually originally on Wattpad, and it became popular enough that Matharu, I'm just gonna call him TM now, okay? I really have no idea how to say his name. If he ever sees this, sorry dude, just, I have no idea. But the first book was on Wattpad, actually, and I believe it is still up there, now that I think about it. And it became popular enough that he was able to publish it, and it became successful. It was on the New York Times bestseller list and everything, and then he made 2 more books, which were also bestsellers. So whenever I criticize this, just keep in mind that I have immense respect for the author, okay? These books have a lot of passion, a lot of heart put into them, and he overcame a lot of odds to become as successful as he is. So, in that regard, just very, very good on you, TM. So what's the book about? Kind of difficult to say. I mean, the story does jump around a bit from place to place. Like, at the beginning, it's just sort of about an outcast boy studying at a magic school. But by the end, it's like full-fledged epic fantasy, which I'm fine with. I do like epic fantasy, and I thought this was a good rendition of that sort of story. It just could have transitioned a little bit better between the different arcs. So at the beginning, a young boy named Fletcher is living out in this middle-of-nowhere town called Pelt, and he runs across an old soldier who has a summoner's book. And he reads through the summoner's book a little bit, and he accidentally summons a demon. Now, in this world, demons are not inherently evil. They're, honestly, they're a lot like Pokemon, I guess is the best way of putting it. Like, Fletcher summons a little salamander, which is only like this big. It's like a little miniature dragon. And he names it Ignatius, and it just sort of chills with him for the most part, unless he tells it to attack or it feels threatened. And then it can breathe fire and stuff. So it's, yeah, it's basically just a little Pokemon. And there's a whole bunch of different types of them. Some of them are way more powerful than others, some of them are way more rare, some of them are really common and weak, and there's a bunch of them that can even evolve into different types. So, like, I mean, it's a neat idea for this sort of story, but, like, yeah, they're Pokemon. And so he summons Ignatius, and he makes friends with him, but then, after getting into a fight with a rather important person in town, he has to flee. And so he runs off to this academy called Vokins, which is an academy that trains battle mages, who are, you guessed it, summoners, who summon demons, and they also are able to use magic by using the mana that comes from their demons. So at first, this is pretty basic story, and they also mention a whole lot about a war with orcs that's going on, and a very tenuous peace with elves that's been going on in their empire for a while. And, I mean, that's like standard fantasy stuff, and then it combines with all like the more fun adventure aspects of the magic school. But then, when Fletcher is at the Magic Academy, he starts hearing about a war with orcs that's going on in the Empire's south, and, as well as how fragile the peace with the elves is, really. So, it's sort of combining the more fun, adventurous magic school aspects with traditional fantasy stuff. And I liked that, personally. You know, it gave us something a little bit different than either of those genres would have individually. And that was quite good. And then, after the first book, minor spoilers here, after the first book, Fletcher is no longer at school, and it's just like straight up regular fantasy at that point for the last two. So, you know, with like epic battles and evil wizards, and there's a crazy evil villain. Like it's a lot of fun. You know, that's really the biggest thing about this entire series. It's just fun. You know, like I can pick apart a lot of stuff in it, and believe me, I'm going to later. But it's just fun to read, you know? It has great action scenes, believe me. Like, there's almost no actual life or death action scenes in the first book, which is kind of boring, to be honest. But then around 2/3 through the second book, they actually start the real battles, and those are legitimately some of the best I've ever read. I mean, they are fucking intense as shit. Like I mean, not to harp on Lord of the Rings, but if you ever read the books, they just sort of describe the battles after they happen. And in this, you're like right in the middle of it, and there's chaos, but you still know what's going on. Like, it's fucking great. It really is. And, you know, most of the characters are pretty fun as well. You know, Fletcher, in the first book, he has a lot of Mary Sue tendencies, and I'll be honest, those never completely go away. Like, he's just the perfect nice guy, everybody likes him. He has a little bit of personality, but not very much. He studies swordplay and magic for a couple of months, and he's able to compete with people. I don't think I'm gonna edit that out. I don't feel like it. So he studies swordplay and magic for a couple of months, and he's able to compete with people that have been doing it for years. Although, to be fair, that's more due to intelligence and strategy than it is just raw skill or power, so fair enough, there's that. And honestly, in the first book, he just feels like a fanfiction self-insert thing. And that's not necessarily bad, but, well, it's almost always bad. You know, like, again, this was written online, and I don't know if TM was ever actually planning on publishing it or anything, or if he was just writing it for fun, but that was a big problem. However, in the second and third books, Fletcher becomes better. He's still never great, but he's better. You know, he makes mistakes, he gets angry, he does stupid shit, you know. Well, I suppose that's redundant, but whatever. You know, he's still way more intelligent and talented than a regular person would be in medieval times, but whatever. Like I said, it's a fun adventure story. Most of the other characters are just kind of there, with the exception of the villains. I'll get to them in a minute, but Fletcher shut up, phone. But Fletcher has one friend named Othello, who's a dwarf, and he's alright, you know, like, you really do feel a sense of camaraderie between the two of them. Other than that, they're all just kind of, you know, they're there. They aren't really annoying, they aren't really good or bad, they're there, they do one or two cool things, they might come up with some ideas or spout some exposition. For the most part, they're all just there. Villains are annoying as hell. Now, I should mention that TM is definitely trying to send a very strong anti-racism message in these books, and he does that with the conflict between humans, elves, and dwarves, and a little bit with orcs as well. Like, he makes it clear that a large part of why they're fighting each other is due to racial animosity. However, there's also practical reasons, like a big part of the reason that war with elves is almost about to start up again is because there are certain people who make money selling weapons to the army, and they're trying to stoke the flames, as it were. So that is a real thing. That's basically a critique of the military-industrial complex. And then it also makes clear that humans are starting to encroach upon orc lands, and that's why they're counterattacking. So that makes sense as well. But he also makes it clear that there's a lot of hatred and tension between the different races. And that's not a bad idea, but it's about as subtle as a 12-gauge shotgun. I mean, it is... Like, you have to be subtle with that sort of thing. Like, every villain, every human villain, I should say, in this book is just a racist dickbag. There's almost nothing else to any of them. Like, they're just like, grr, I hate dwarves, let's punch dwarf, punch. Oh, grr, those stupid elves. Yeah, let's fight them because... Yeah. And I'm not saying those sort of people don't exist. They certainly do. Like, there's plenty of them. But if you want to get a message across, you have to be subtle with it. I mean, the reason that the message in a book like To Kill a Mockingbird or Animal Farm or even something like The Zombie Chronicles is so good is because it's subtle. Okay, whereas something like Uncle Tom's Cabin is just kind of preachy and annoying. Disclaimer, slavery is bad, I just don't like Uncle Tom's Cabin. It's not a good book, alright? It's a little bit less ham-fisted in the third book, I guess. It's a little bit more realistic, but it's still not subtle or really good at all, so that could have used a lot more polishing. But again, for the standards of something that was written online, it's fucking amazing. Now, all the villains are annoying racist dickbags, with one exception. The main villain of the series is the White Orc. His name is Khan, right? And he doesn't actually show up until around 2/3 through the second book, but they do mention him a couple of times before then. And he's just sort of evil for the sake of being evil, but he's fucking intimidating as hell. I mean, he has almost no screen time, but he fucking makes the most of it. Like, every time he shows up, you can feel the dread coming through the pages. Like, I mean, that ties back into the phenomenal action as well. Like, every time he shows up, shit goes down. I mean, like, I wish there had been more of him, but at the same time, if there had been more of him, we wouldn't have nearly the same shock value that we did every time we saw him there. So, like, I mean, I'd be lying if I said he was the most amazing villain ever, but I fucking loved reading about him every time he was on the page. He was very good in that regard. He's just fucking evil. And he's very good at doing that. So, the villain in this, while by no means perfect, I fucking loved him. Maybe that's a personal thing. Maybe some of you will be annoyed by his lack of character, but I fucking loved him. As far as fantasy worlds go, this one is kind of good, you know. It wasn't a complete ripoff of Tolkien, but I'd be lying if I said it was super great or in-depth or anything like that. I mean, the world feels very small, but also very dense, if that makes sense. You know, like, there's snow-covered mountains and European fields and a savanna and a desert and a jungle and an ocean, all really close to one another in the Empire, so I mean, that's kind of weird, but fuck it, there's magic, so I don't care. The magic in this is very good too. Like, they actually go into quite a bit of detail about how it works, and I personally like that. It's, I'm kind of a nerd about that sort of thing. It's just very neat to read about the different sorts of physics and stuff that you find in another world. And it also goes into quite a bit of detail about the demons, how they work, and why they can use magic. Like, the way it works is, demons have runes on their bodies, and when they put mana into them, that has certain effects. Like, for example, Ignatius, the salamander, has a fire rune in his throat, so if he just puts mana into that, he breathes out fire. And, you know, it's little details like that that really make this world feel a little bit more alive than your average Tolkien ripoff. Now, granted, the exposition for this could be clunky as hell at times. Like, the exposition and the dialogue, especially in the first two books, is weird. Like, it just does not sound like something humans would say, and it does suffer for that, for the most part. But it improves quite a bit between the first and second book, whereas the first book it's bad, the second book it's just kind of okay, or even subpar at times. And then the third book, it's like, it's fine, you know. It's not really great dialogue, you know, it's not Joss Whedon or anything, but it's fine, it works. It wasn't distracting anymore, you know. And most of the exposition, same story. It wasn't really distracting. The covers for these books are really kick-ass too. Like, the Novice is just kind of okay, you know, a little bit standard. You know, there's just a dude with cool tattoos and a hood just standing there with a sword. But then the second and third ones, he turns into this, like, Ramsay Bolton-looking motherfucker with all this, with this cool jacket and boots and a flintlock pistol. So, whoever did the artwork for these did a very good job in that regard as well. So there's not much else to say without going into a bunch of specifics. I mean, like I said, just a fun fantasy adventure with some kick-ass action, one or two decent characters, really good villain, and very, very nice story behind it. Like, TM is definitely one of my idols. Like, as a young, aspiring author, I really look up to that guy. And as much as I like to criticize his writing being really clunky at times, it's just fucking fun. It has a lot of charm to it, and honestly, he should be very proud of what he's created. I mean, they're making a prequel to The Summoner, which comes out next year, and I look forward to reading that. I also look forward to reading whatever else he makes in the future. So that was it. Subscribe. Please? I mean, be nice. I can't force you, but, like, pretty please? Pretty please with sugar on top?